Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to the Slumpbuster with Juju and Dre, episode 11, recording here on Friday, October 11th, 2019. Find us on all major streaming platforms. On today's episode, we discuss how Daryl Morey may have cost the NBA multi-millions of dollars, Jay Gruden's firing, Clayton Kershaw's continued postseason struggles, and of course, your NFL Week 6 preview. Let's bust that slump, and without further ado, welcome to our show. Dre!
What's up, Juju? How's it going?
How's it going, man? You know what time it is? It's time to record our 11th episode on Friday, October 11th, and we're recording here at 11 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. A bit of a late show. We're doing this pretty much after work, so I'm going from a full-time job to my part-time job. So basically I have two full-time jobs here, which is more than some people have. Looking at you, Jay Gruden.
Man, why you got to throw Jay Gruden on the bus like that? I mean, everybody knows that he got fired this week. Poor dude. But no, something else. It's October 11th, right? It's our 11th show, 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, almost 11:11. So lots of 11s going on.
Exactly. Are you ready to make a wish?
I've already got my wish. I still haven't won $1 million, but hopefully one day it shows up for me.
Wow, really, Dre? That's pretty selfish. I was just wishing for more successful episodes from the Slumpbuster with Juju and Dre, but at least one of us is thinking team-oriented here.
I would share the $1 million with you.
You would share the $1 million? Okay, we're going to need it because we need more invested in the advertising budget these days. Granted, we're doing a great job on Instagram. If you love dank memes, our meme game is 10 out of 10, would recommend.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Our social media team's doing a fantastic job. Always posting stuff that's new, funny, exciting. Check it out.
Exactly. We're a bit of a riot on there, so definitely stop by our Instagram. But yeah, I threw out his name just now. Probably one of the biggest topics of the week. So there's a lot of fun topics this week to really get into. But I thought a good starting point was a topic that happened on Monday. So someone got a bad case of the Mondays. Jay Gruden officially fired as the head coach for the Washington Redskins. That was only the second most shocking thing about the Redskins behind me moving them behind the Miami Dolphins in my power rankings this week. But I thought it was appropriate because firing a head coach mid-season, it's not a good look. And honestly, the Redskins are probably the biggest dumpster fire organization right now in the NFL when I really break it down. Because the most thing you could say about the Dolphins is they're bad. They've lost a significant amount of talent, but at least they have a sense of direction. At least they have a sense of where they're going. I don't know where this Washington Redskins team is going. Do you have any clue, Dre?
No, and that's the thing is, I mean, I still didn't drop them behind the Miami Dolphins in my power rankings, but I can obviously see the argument for you moving them back behind the Dolphins. The thing is you're right. They have some veterans, or they're trying to pull in some veterans, even at the quarterback position. They haven't fully committed to, hey, well, we got to get Dwayne Haskins some reps. We've still got some of our other quarterbacks that are going to be playing. They've started 3 quarterbacks just this season, right? And so you're like, hey, I don't know which direction you're really going in. Normally, if it's hey, we're all in on Dwayne Haskins, right? Or we think that's going to be our quarterback of the future, then you're going to get him the reps, even though he did not look very good.
I mean, you mentioned the entire selection of veteran quarterbacks they have on this roster right now. So they started Colt McCoy last week against the Patriots, decided to just throw him to the dogs with that matchup. And then you have Case Keenum, who got announced as a starter earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, what are you doing with Dwayne Haskins? Because I'm hearing reports that they still think he's 2 or 3 years away, which is a terrible look considering he was a top 15 pick. At this point in the NFL, if you're drafting anyone that high, specifically a quarterback in the first round, you expect them to start. Look what's going on with Daniel Jones right now. And yeah, Daniel Jones got his ass kicked against the Patriots last night. We'll get into that. But the Giants at this point gave up. They knew what was going on with Eli Manning. And they thought at this point, the best thing to do with Daniel Jones is give him some game reps.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the argument as far as you don't want to completely destroy the young guy's confidence, but the only way Dwayne Haskins is really going to learn is by being on the field. And if you're the Redskins, like I said, going back to the sense of direction, they're not in that tank for Tua thing anyway. And do I think there's a noticeable difference between Tua and Dwayne Haskins? No, I think they're relatively on the same tier of quarterback because if they're this bad with Dwayne, they're going to be just as bad next year with Tua.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is if they do hop on that tank for Tua bandwagon, right, then you're in this weird situation in which the Cardinals were in last year, right, where you have to basically ship out a first round draft pick that you had the previous year for now a whole lot less value, right? So maybe at most you get a second, but probably closer to a third, right? Especially if you're saying, hey, Dwayne Haskins is still going to be 2-3 years out. So now if you're trying to draft another quarterback, and other teams have heard you say Dwayne Haskins is 2 or 3 years out, who's going to want to give up a first round pick? So you basically are just trading a first round pick for a third round pick, or, possibly even worse.
Yeah, if you're giving up on your first round quarterbacks after a year, then that's not a great look for the organization. I mean, the Cardinals, for everything that we're saying positive about Kyler Murray these days, it looks like he's competing and everything. It still is a terrible look that they got rid of Josh Rosen after 1 year. Regardless of what you think about Josh Rosen these days, they basically lost out on a first round draft pick. And especially a top 10 draft pick. When you have a top 10 draft pick, these are supposed to be your blue chippers. These are supposed to be the players that are going to carry you for the next decade. And they gave up on Josh Rosen like that. And even top 15, that still is a valuable range to draft a starting quarterback for your team. I mean, I want to say Patrick Mahomes drafted 14 as well. So.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. And the thing that's difficult about the NFL is because there's so many positions and so many rounds in the draft, you have to hit on the first round. Like, you have to take what's guaranteed and be able to make sure that that's going to be talent, because you don't know what you're going to get later on in the second, the third, the fourth, fifth, sixth rounds. And there's so many other positions that you have to really find who can be, who can play at that next level. And it gets harder and harder those further rounds that you go and the more players that you're having to evaluate. So that first round when it comes to football is extremely important, and you have to hit on it. And if all you're doing is, hey, I'm going to draft somebody in the first round, we give up on them in a year, ship that talent out, then obviously you're never going to be a successful football team.
Yeah, and I just don't see where this team is going to make a turnaround at any point soon. Are they still even hoping that Alex Smith can make his way back? I doubt it. I think that guy's career is done. And no disrespect to Alex Smith, it was just a gruesome leg injury. I don't think you could come back for it. And even if you did come back for it, why would you want to come back to play for this Washington Redskins organization? Trent Williams doesn't even want to play with them, and he's under contract.
Yeah, exactly. And we've already started to see some of the players that have said, hey, look, I've been getting beat up, I've been hurt, I don't really want to come back to that. And so after that gruesome leg injury, like you said, I personally would not want to come back from that. It seems that Alex Smith has plenty of money, I'm hoping, I think, right? I don't know his personal finances. But if I'm him, I would say, hey, look, it's good, time to call it quits. And I'm sure he can get a job, possibly coaching or being an offensive coordinator or something for at least at the college level, but possibly even into the pros, start to work his way in as an assistant coach.
Yeah, one of the lingering stories from the Redskins, obviously, too, I mentioned just Trent Williams a little bit ago. He had all these concerns with the coaching staff, the training staff, and all that. And even after firing Jay Gruden, still no traction on him coming back to the team. Between that holdout, a midseason coaching firing, everything else, I don't see how the Redskins aren't the 32nd ranked team in the league. And that says nothing about how I see the Tank Bowl taking place this weekend going.
Yeah, so for me, the only reason why I had the Redskins a little bit higher is because they at least showed some signs of life against the Eagles, right? So for a while, they were leading the Eagles in that first game that they had played. And then, the offense for the Eagles sort of woke up and Carson Wentz popped off, which I knew he would. And, the Eagles ultimately went on to win that game. So just because I've seen some signs of life and that Washington could possibly beat a team, that's why I have them ranked a little bit above Miami. But I think you're right. Like, Miami knows that, hey, we know we're not going to be good this year, and we know that there's going to be some stud quarterbacks coming up in this draft, right? Specifically Tua. So we might as well tank for him and draft him, right? And rack up some draft picks. And that's exactly what they're doing, is they're basically getting rid of everybody that wants to get out of there, and they're just racking up some draft picks. So they do have at least some direction. Where you're right, the Redskins, outside of that sign of life that I said in the first game, they don't really have the direction, though.
Yeah, and in week one, at this point, anything that's happened in week one, I'm giving up all thought process towards, because the funny thing about NFL week one is every team still thinks they have a chance at making the playoffs in week one. So you'll see some teams that will show out a little bit harder than they would otherwise later in the season after taking a couple L's. Look at Cincinnati. They had that tough week 1 against Seattle, and they haven't looked anywhere close to that type of production ever since. And that same thing that's happened for the Redskins outside of leading the Eagles for a half. That's probably the bright spot of their season. Well, I guess they did at one point show something against the Patriots last week, but lame duck head coach Jay Gruden, everyone was expecting it. Going into the weekend, I think Jay Gruden just wanted to show something, and at least he had like a half of almost leading the Patriots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think this is an interesting discussion in that. So which week do you think is where we start to really find out where teams are, what they're going to be towards the end of the year, right? Because in week 1, everybody's saying, oh, so-and-so is, either good or they're really bad. But I think as we start getting through the season, right, we start to see, okay, here's how things are really going to be. Here's the teams that are actually bad. Here's the teams that are actually good. So which week would you choose as sort of your indicator of, okay, now by this week, sort of know where everybody's at?
I think honestly at this point we've hit that point of the season where we more or less know where teams are going to be able to produce or not. So I don't know if you could say a hard cap at week 6, because I do remember last year the Carolina Panthers were 4-1 heading into week 6 against the Steelers, and then obviously after that 50-point beatdown that the Steelers put on them, they just backslid all the way to that mediocre finish they had to end the season. But maybe around this week, maybe by next week, then you can make a solid argument for me which teams are going to be playoff teams, which teams are going to be Super Bowl teams, and which teams are going to be the absolute dog shit of organizations that we have right here with the Dolphins, Redskins, Bengals, Falcons. I mean, I've already given up on the Falcons too. I've considered them one of the worst teams in football this year as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we're starting to get to that point in the season. I'm going to give it about like 2 more weeks or so, just because I still want to see how some of these teams shake out. Like one of the big matchups I'm looking forward to is the Steelers-Chargers matchup. So the Steelers, I'm pretty sure are bad, right? But I think the Chargers might also be very bad this year. But they're also still really talented. So I think here like this week, next week, and then the week after is where we'll really know. There's other teams like Dallas that I'm not quite sure where they're at, right? Like, do we have them still? A lot of people at the start of the season, after they beat 3 bad teams, said they're going to the Super Bowl. They have the best Super Bowl odds right now. And obviously we've seen them regress a little bit. Yeah. But I think you're right. We're getting to that point of the season.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess it's time we should really close off this discussion. I guess the main thing to say is just like on the bright side for Jay Gruden, he's probably not going to be unemployed for long. After all, he does have a brother in the NFL. Obviously, I don't think that John's going to hire him as the OC. I think he actually does enjoy having Greg Olsen as the offensive coordinator out there in Oakland. But I could see him signing on as an offensive assistant if he doesn't decide just take this whole year off. As far as what's next for the Redskins, I don't know which college coach or which current NFL coordinator really wants this position. I've highlighted a couple names in my head. Could they convince Jim Harbaugh? I don't see him wanting to take the Redskins as his next opportunity back in the NFL. If Mike Tomlin gets released in Pittsburgh, people are throwing his name out there. I don't think Mike Tomlin would want to go there either. And then if you're going to throw out like coaches like Lincoln Riley to coach the Redskins, Lincoln Riley's, he knows that the second he opts to go into the NFL, he's going to pick a position that's going to elevate him for the next 10 to 20 years, not the Redskins.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're exactly right. It's difficult. So one, I don't know where Jay Gruden ends up, right? Like you said, maybe there's possibly some opportunity with Oakland, though Oakland's doing fantastic right now. I don't know if they really even, want to change up their coaching staff or have room. Maybe he ends up as an assistant somewhere or coordinator, maybe even in a college, though I don't know if you would want to take that step from NFL into college after being in the NFL for such a long time. As far as the Redskins' next coach, I don't really know, right? Like you said, with Tomlin, I know his name's been being thrown around just because I'm, a Steelers fan and I follow a lot of the things for the Steelers. But if Tomlin has had a hard time with how successful of an organization the Steelers have been, notoriously, right? Like he inherited a really good team from Cowher, even having a Big Ben, Antonio Brown, and Le'Veon Bell, even though they were headaches, right? Like you're at least gifted a really good offense. You've even had some fantastic defensive players. And now you go to Washington, right, that has nothing. And you don't know what the future is going to be. I don't think Tomlin would want that job. I really don't think it's that attractive of a job at all, outside of maybe a few guys that do want to move up from college into the NFL. But then you're not in the NFL for very long because it's not like you'll have a lot of success. So
I think one name I'm going to throw out there, and you could write this in pen for me, Mike McCarthy. I could see him being the head coach in Washington. I don't think any young coordinator looking for an opportunity is going to want to put the Redskins at the top of their list. I know a lot of people are saying the Kansas City Chiefs OC, and forgive me on this one, I'm forgetting his name. It's a really cool last name if we look it up, but they're throwing his name out there, and the Andy Reid coaching tree has had a lot of success in the NFL. But I would even think that Andy Reid might even tell him this is not the right opportunity for you.
Yeah, I think so. And like we've been saying all show long, we just don't know the direction that they're heading in, right? They don't have sort of a culture of any type of way. Like it's sort of a smaller market. They're not that big of a franchise as far as like monetary value and, fan following and all that stuff. So it's just a really difficult situation for any new coach or coordinator looking to step into a coach position.
Okay. Just because it was going to bother me if I didn't say it during the show, Eric Bieniemy is the offensive coordinator out there in KC. So that's in one name if the Redskins fans are looking for at least somewhat exciting Andy Reid coaching tree. Like I said, notoriously productive coaching tree. So if you do manage to snag him, that would actually be one thing to get excited about Washington.
I think the thing, though, is sort of tagging on to the Tomlin storyline is what if the Steelers do get rid of Tomlin, though? So now Washington has to compete with the Steelers, who are pretty objectively a better organization, right? So now, would you rather go for the Washington job? Or I'm sure the Steelers can go ahead and pick anybody that Washington has their eyes on.
I would say this, and I'll throw this out there as well. I could see Mike Tomlin ending up with the Cleveland Browns if that happened. But we're going on a little bit of a tangent. We're getting away from the Redskins and Jay Gruden when we start talking about other coaches on the hot seat. That may be a topic for a different day. I don't know, Dre. I think we should move on from this one. Why don't you take it off with us on this next subject? Kind of a multi-layered discussion right here. A lot going on. Similarly, involves troubles in D.C., so a little bit of a tie-in.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Jay Gruden lost his job. The next person in a different sport that might lose their job, though, is Daryl Morey. So GM of the Houston Rockets. And it's interesting. It all happened over a tweet. So I guess to kick this section off, what are some of the most regrettable things that you've said or posted online, Juju? Something that you're just like, oh man, I wish I could take that back.
Basically anything that high school Julian ever posted, said, or did. I remember a few years ago in college, I just went through a purge of everything related to high school Juju. Anything that person is dead, buried, and gone, and only shows up in the occasional awkward moment that is the life and times of Julian Isaac Martinez.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat, right? Like a few years ago, I did the same thing as I was thinking, and I was like, man, a lot of these old Facebook posts and tweets are popping up for a lot of famous people, and I doubt anybody's digging up dirt on me. But I was
now you're in the public sphere, man.
I know, I'm in the public sphere, so now I'm like, oh shoot, I need to go back and just delete all of the stupid stuff I said. And
at least you're not on Twitter.
I know, and well, that's exactly what I think is going through Daryl Morey's mind right now. So to give a little bit of a background, into what's happening is Daryl Morey decided to chime in and posted literally just 6 words on Twitter, and it said, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong," or 6-7 words, however much it is, right? And so what's going on right now is Hong Kong, there's a lot of protests about sort of the Chinese government's overreach into, Hong Kong is supposed to be sort of its own separate city-state. And Daryl Morey tweeted this, and immediately I think he realized, shoot, I need to take this down because this is stupid. And now the Chinese government is pissed at not only the Rockets, but the NBA as a whole, and it could have a whole lot of different implications.
Well, one of the big ones about it is the financial implication. There was a lot of discussion on this. How much money annually does the NBA profit off of their business with China? And some numbers that I have seen thrown out there when it comes to it. So it's roughly about $750 million of revenue per year in Chinese dollars. with unlimited growth potential because of the sheer population in China that's obviously well documented. And then for the Rockets franchise alone, and the reason why you say that maybe Daryl Morey's a little bit on the hot seat aside from their postseason struggles, $300 million in merchandising the Rockets make from the Chinese yearly. Estimated, rough number, but that's because when you consider the Rockets, prior to that tweet, were China's most beloved franchise, given their extensive history when it came to players like Yao Ming, integrating him into the NBA. You could argue that he was a bigger draw than Kobe in the 2000s just because of a whole country was rallying behind one player. So now you can make an argument the Rockets could be the most hated team in China for the next few decades.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and then the thing that also, right, so they had Yao Ming, who is a national treasure in China, right? The Chinese, they're really serious about their sports, especially the Olympic sports, but any sport that's really big, if they have an athlete that's really good at it, they 100% stand behind them. And so, of course, they stand behind Yao Ming, but Houston itself has a very large Asian population as well, right? So I travel to Houston a lot. I have, family that's there, and I am half Asian. And so there's a big, Chinese population down there in Houston. So, I mean, even just in America, there's a big Chinese following, right? And now Chinese Americans and, Chinese are very different, right? But it still has a major impact.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this is kind of an interesting thing, too, that we can add this to our listeners' day when it comes to listening about this subject. So you've actually been to China before. You did a study abroad there years ago. From all indications, you had a great time there, but what were some kind of like noticeable things that you noticed were very different from the United States? Culturally, just your daily going about business?
Yeah, so it's really interesting that the way China is. And in fact, it's one of my favorite places that I've ever been. And I encourage a lot of people to travel there. But in a lot of ways, it also feels a little bit strange. And you could definitely tell that it's very different from the United States. So right away, as we were being prepped and briefed of, hey, we're going to go over there, here's what's going to happen. We were told if you have a laptop or you have a cell phone, right, the Chinese government will take it as you're going into their country, and they may possibly even bug it or download software or spyware possibly into your laptops, into your cell phones. And so we were warned right away that if you want anything to stay as it is, as far as electronics, you better just leave it home. And so I ended up actually buying a separate cell phone and turned on one of my older ones that I wasn't using anymore and used that one in China. So that's immediately one thing that you look for. Some of the other things is the Chinese government is very serious about protecting their businesses, right? And having, sort of government influence on what's going on. So they're starting to become a more free market society, but at the same time, they're very serious when it comes to things. And if they don't like the way that you're doing something, they will 100% shut you down, right? So Facebook is not allowed over there. There's a lot of other online sites that you just cannot simply access. There's a lot of American, but other countries around the world, right? Some European companies that are just not allowed to sell products over there. And it's all what the government says. And sort of tying into the whole Hong Kong thing is the Chinese government, they also like to have just pretty much total control over the population. And so they even recently made a super camera that I think they have, it's either in Shanghai or Beijing, that can zoom in for like 10 miles or something. So they can literally, with this camera, find somebody that's 10 miles away and have perfect resolution and be able to see their face perfectly. It's insane. And the Hong Kong people really don't like that. And they don't want that rule just because Hong Kong used to be a British territory. So Hong Kong is slightly different from mainland China. They're sort of their own city-state. They sort of operate on their own. And what happened is there was a proposed law which did not pass that would have allowed for the extradition of criminals to mainland China to be prosecuted by mainland China, basically giving mainland China more power in Hong Kong. And that's why the Hong Kong citizens didn't like it.
I see. The main pushback when it comes to this whole issue is what's going on. It's not just like China is at war with the NBA. A lot of U.S. citizens have little problems with the way the NBA has handled this whole situation as well. On our side of things, people have kind of been at odds with the NBA because at the first onset of Daryl Morey's tweet, it seemed as though the NBA was a little bit of kowtowing to China's rule here. And that wouldn't be completely unfounded when it comes to the way that other businesses have worked with China in the past. A couple of notable American companies that have kind of bended to the will of China, Delta Airlines, Activision, Apple, has also made some decisions over little things like a Taiwanese emoji popped up. China said they didn't like it. Apple got some major pushback from it. Do you think the NBA did the right thing with the way they're doing this? Because now you see Adam Silver, he's out there. He's standing with Daryl a little bit because, in a way, he's there to protect his free speech. But then I also see stuff like this pop up. So there was fans at both the Philadelphia game and the game in Washington having free Hong Kong shirts taken away from them on American soil. That's ridiculous. I mean, just this is a tough discussion to speak about because there's a lot of political ramifications. There's a lot of multi-layered concepts such as free speech, free market, everything else. Mm-hmm. But if this was happening in Beijing and the Chinese said, yeah, we don't want you wearing that in a shirt, fine. But to tell an American citizen on American soil in Washington, D.C., of all places, that he can't wear a shirt, ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so here's the interesting thing is that the NBA is, I think, notorious for allowing their players to be outspoken and really speak their mind, right? I know there's been a whole lot of issues that go on with the players kneeling during the football games, right? But you get a little bit more pushback in the NFL and the owners have a little bit more say and control as well as the league. But in the NBA, right, players have been very outspoken, right? LeBron James and many others have straight up come out and said, like, hey, here's my opinions. And the NBA encourages that. And
yeah, but sorry to interject, but they've been notoriously silent when it comes to this regard. So the Lakers are literally playing in China here. So we were listening to this probably on a Saturday. So as of Thursday, the Lakers were playing in China. And I haven't heard a peep from LeBron James about this subject.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think you're right, is that we've been so outspoken and we're used to the NBA being a little bit more outspoken as far as coaches, right? Even you have your Steve Kerrs, Greg Popovich, players included. And now it's sort of a little bit silent. And I think it's because people don't know what to do, right? When you're talking about the United States, and this is one of the things that I love most about the United States is we can openly criticize the U.S. government however we want to see it. And you don't really run the risk of losing your job, right? Like, there might be some strange instances where it could happen, but most of the time you're not going to be told that, hey, you're not going to be allowed to play here anymore or anything like that. But now you're dealing with a country that has a lot of power, right? Like we sort of were saying, possibly as much as $750 million per year in revenue, right, for the NBA, which is a large chunk, which I think we could even get into a little bit further, a little bit later. And they have so much say, and it is expected to grow, right? Like China, right now you have your big populations in like Beijing, Shanghai, Chengdu, some of those really big cities, but even their smaller cities are starting to grow and they like the product that the NBA has. But China, 100%, if they want, can say nobody will watch NBA basketball anymore in China. And they will end all the agreements and they will literally throw people in jail for wearing an NBA t-shirt or jersey or anything that says Houston Rockets on it.
Can you believe that the NBA is involved in such a large political discussion? But yes, the main thing about it is a lot of this comes off so hypocritical, the silence from the NBA. Mostly because, yes, they are very outspoken. And the NBA has made it a point to be so involved in social issues, maybe too far involved. We've seen them take away all-star games from Charlotte because of the transgender bathroom issue. We've seen them go out of their way to rename the owner position to ambassador just because of LeBron James making them kind of bend to his will when he threw out claims like the NFL owners have a slave owner mentality. So now that you have legitimate human rights violations involved in another country that you're making millions/billions of dollars off of, sorry, we can't talk about this. And I don't expect these players to be experts in Chinese politics, certainly like Steve Kerr when he was even said it in his interview. I'm not an expert in Chinese politics. I know a little bit, but not much. I understand that. But if you're going to be so vocal about these type of issues and then so silent when it comes to your bottom line, it stands out. It's noticeable.
No, it definitely is. And that's the thing. I don't know necessarily what the right thing to do is for the NBA. So I'm not going to act like I've got it all figured out and I know the magic bullet, because it's not simple. I think they need to encourage free speech, right? They've been doing it all along and they've had people that have been outspoken. You might as well let people speak their mind. And I think the NBA has to realize that, hey, if we let people speak their mind, right, it's possibly going to start costing us some major money. And I mean, it sucks, right? But like, they've set a precedence in that, hey, we're going to let our players and coaches and, anybody affiliated with the NBA really can be outspoken about their beliefs and what they view as being injustices or anything like that. And so I think they almost have to continue it, right? Otherwise, then you really are seen as, oh, well, now all you care about is the money, which that is ultimately, I think, what the NBA cares about. But yeah, it's a really tough situation. It's hard. And me personally, what I do if I'm the NBA is I try to tell the Rockets, hey, fire Daryl Morey so that we could apologize to the Chinese. Like, that's honestly what I would do.
Well, here's the thing that you put yourself into a corner with if you make that decision. Daryl Morey becomes an advocate for free speech. His name is going to be plastered everywhere. It honestly would turn into a big political discussion in this nation, just knowing how the mainstream media works. And if Daryl Morey, I don't think Daryl Morey ever saw himself becoming this high of a figure in U.S., China, international relations. But honestly, he would become a big figurehead for this if the Rockets decided to fire him. And that might have ramifications for them on U.S. soil. So now you're not worried so much about Chinese dollars. You have to worry about the American consumer. And honestly, I think that might be more important, because who's going to these games?
Yeah, I mean, that you're right. The American consumer is still the number one purchaser or buyer of the NBA's product, right? Whether that's jerseys or it's actual live TV, right? The products that the NBA sells is primarily going to the US consumer. And you're 100% right. Like, I could see people pushing back saying, hey, no, Daryl Morey has the freedom of speech here in this country and does not deserve to be fired for that tweet.
Yeah, because at that point, what are we saying? So free speech exists everywhere except Twitter.
Yeah, it's so I guess what do you think the NBA should do then, Juju? Do you have an idea or
what do I think the NBA should do? It's tough, but I think it wouldn't be completely irresponsible for them to pull back a little bit on their Chinese relationship until they can negotiate a better deal.
Okay.
Because I think this could have significant pushback for the Chinese government if they continue to deprive their citizens. Obviously, we're seeing the protests already become such a issue. And I don't want to act too like I know everything about Chinese politics myself. But if you're depriving citizens of the one thing of joy that they have in their lives, which maybe is just turning on a Rockets game, a Lakers game, whatever, your citizens are not going to be happy. And look back at any country, any history of a nation, doesn't end well for the governments in charge when that happens. So, I mean, I'll throw that out there. Man, I never foresaw the NBA being the reason behind World War III. I gotta say.
Honestly, like, bombs might start flying over this topic. But I think, so we've talked a lot about, the impact of Daryl Morey and the Houston Rockets. And Daryl Morey's done a fantastic job making Houston a contender every year. Like, obviously, they've never gotten over the hump. But I think there's a lot more to it as well, that if the Chinese market just 100% disappears, there's thoughts that the salary cap, which is tied directly to the amount of revenue that the NBA brings in, could also decrease. And that could be a 10 to 15% decrease in the NBA salary cap. So not only does that impact how the level of talent that you could have on your team, right, coming up into the future, but then that also impacts what your max salaries are. So your max salaries are always calculated as a percent of your cap. So 0 to 6 years is 25% of the cap, 7 to 9 years is 30% of the cap, and then 10 plus years is 35% of the cap. So this year, right, like a player like a D'Angelo Russell, who was an all-star, ended up getting a max salary spot. He's only getting $25 million just because he's only been in the league for less than 6 years. And the salary cap is currently, I think, at $101 million, right? Whereas your players like your LeBron Jameses and players like that are closer to your $35-36 million mark. But now if there's a 10 to 15% decrease, right, now you go from being a $25 million per year to $21 million per year is the max that you can get. So it's going to have mostly a big impact on your upcoming free agents, right? Your DeMar DeRozans, Anthony Davis, Kyle Lowry, Gordon Hayward, and those guys.
Another thing we didn't even mention too, Klay Thompson, his name has been thrown around, D Wade, all them, because they have these big shoe deals with Chinese companies as well. They're impacted a little bit by this as well. So this is like an onion. It's like an ogre, in fact. There's a lot of layers right here to this concept. We're trying to peel them back and see what's going to happen. And maybe it's just a little bit too early in this discussion to really know what the net result is going to be. And I don't even think we're going to have any solidified answers when it comes to this for another few years. I will throw it out there, though. I get why you're focusing so much on China, because not only in sports, but in other forms of media, like obviously the Marvel movies are really big. Film is really big, too, when it comes to the Chinese dollars. But if the NBA is so focused on making this a global game, why not focus on other markets, other emerging markets that aren't causing nearly as many issues, and that you legitimately negotiate? Because right now it doesn't even feel like a negotiation or a back and forth between the NBA and China. It seems more like China dictating what's going on with an American-based company.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I think now that you mention it, you're starting to lean me towards more of your stance, right? So I had said that I personally would come out and say, hey, look, we got to get rid of Daryl Morey. But you are right, is that they could grow it possibly, right? Like in your Indias and some of your other places, right? There's some Middle Eastern countries that are starting to come up, or some countries in, Eastern Europe that have previously been poor but are starting to develop. Some
ton of African nations.
African nations, right? And so maybe if you could start to grow your brand a little bit more elsewhere, you can also say, hey, no, we stood behind our people for freedom of speech, right? And we stand for freedoms everywhere around the world. And we do stand for social justice, regardless of where we are. And we're even willing to take the several $100 million hit in our bottom line, as long as we can stand for people all around the world. And so from a strategy standpoint, that might be the other thing. I'll stick to my Daryl Morey stance just because I said it earlier in the show, but I could see the NBA saying, hey, that our strategy will be that instead. We'll take the $700 million hit now, and hopefully we'll make it back in some of these other countries.
All right. Are you ready to talk about the game actually on the court now? Because I love this discussion, and I think it's going to definitely be a constantly developing issue as we go. But there's only so many more ways we can go about this while we're still learning about the fallout from it, really.
Yeah. So I guess one last thing before we wrap up on this topic, and I'm going to make it real quick, is when I was actually out there in China, just to show you how big of an impact China has, like we were saying, on even American companies, and we talked about the Marvel movies. So in China, in order to be able to show Iron Man 3, I believe it was, when we were out there, Iron Man 3 had just come out, right? And it was big here in the United States. Iron Man's been one of Marvel's biggest, sellers, right? And in order for them to be able to show Iron Man 3 in theaters in China, and I kid you not, we went to a Chinese theater to watch it, they had to add an extra scene at the end of Iron Man 3, right? So Marvel always has their post-credit scenes. There was an extra one that had Chinese doctors being the ones to operate on Iron Man, right? So on Tony Stark, to help him get rid of the shrapnel that was in his chest and help keep him alive. And basically to say, China is the reason why Iron Man still lives. And it's crazy. Like, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. But that's how much influence they have and how much power, because there's such a big market. And they said, if you do not add this extra scene in which China saves Iron Man, right, or at least Chinese citizens are the ones saving Iron Man, you will not be allowed to show Iron Man in our theaters.
And that's just what I'm talking about. I just don't agree with that concept. I guess whatever Disney, the NBA, or whatever it has to do to get that bag, but morally, I guess I'm opposed to it right now.
Yeah, no, it's just crazy. 100% true story. But yeah, we gotta move on. But I think this is one of those big issues that I personally think is not being talked about enough. But I'm sure we'll hear more to come, even in the next few years. Like
I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about it here next week too. The way that because you talk about it hasn't been displayed enough. I feel like in the last 24 hours, we're definitely seeing a lot more stories develop about this, and we're going to be one of the podcasts hitting hard on this subject to better inform our listeners. Maybe you'll agree more with my side. Maybe you'll agree more with Aundre's side. Maybe you'll meet us in the middle. But we want you to at least be well informed on this subject moving forward, because it does have a lot of impact to not only the NBA game, but I've heard some buzz about football. Baseball's trying to get into China. There's a lot of major American companies and major American sports brands that are trying to get into this market at kind of a controversial time too, between the U.S. and China and trade relations. But I think it's time that we focus on the court business, because we are 2 weeks away from the start of the NBA regular season. Mm-hmm. And with that said, we're, like I mentioned on last week's show, we're probably not going to go division by division with the NBA, because we all know it's really about these conferences, these top 8 teams. So we're going to start out East. What I wanted to do for our listeners is we're only going to focus on the top 8 teams. So Aundre here went out of his way to make us his top 8 playoff teams. So I want him to read them off, going from number 8 all the way up to number 1.
Yeah, so I cheated a little bit because I wasn't quite sure, but I think there's quite a few teams here sort of in this number 8 spot. So specifically in the Eastern Conference, right? Vying for that number 8 spot, I've got the Heat, the Magic, and the Pistons.
Okay, so kind of a little bit of a toss-up right there right now. Why don't you go through your list and we'll break it down as we go.
Yeah, so the Heat, they've got Jimmy Butler, right? The Magic were also pretty competitive last year, and the Pistons are also really good. Do you want me to go on through 7, 6, all of that?
Read them all, and we'll kind of break it down after you're done.
All right, so they got number 8. Number 7, I have the Nets. Number 6, I got the Pacers. I'm a little bit messed up. So then I guess 1 sec. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6, I actually have the Nets. So the Heat, Magic, Piston are sort of my 7/8. 6, I got the Nets. 5, I got the Pacers. 4, I have the Raptors falling from, defending champions down to 4 in the East. Then I got the Celtics, then the Bucks, and then the 76ers.
Okay. So let's talk about kind of like that scrap heap you have at the bottom of the Eastern Conference playoffs for the year. So Heat, Magic, Pistons, so vying for the 7-8 seeds respectively. Now, when I'm breaking down each of these teams, obviously Jimmy Butler going to the Heat, that was their big offseason addition. The Pistons, they added Derrick Rose. They still have a recovering Blake Griffin. And then the Magic were just a scrappy team. They managed to pull down a couple games against, as mentioned, defending champs Raptors in last year's playoffs. With that said, I've always kind of had a soft spot in my heart for Jimmy Buckets. It's something about like that mentality he has. I really enjoy watching on the court. So I actually have the Heat a little bit higher than you. I think that I could see them legitimately finishing as a 5 seed, if not even pushing their way into 4. Maybe something about Pat Riley linking up with someone like Jimmy Butler, someone so aggressive, dominant. I could see that being a little bit of a sneaky team that might compete out there in the East. Not at the championship level, because that top tier of teams, I don't see how anyone really beats them out of the East. But don't be surprised if they upset a top 4 team. Specifically, they match up against, pains me to say this, but the Celtics.
I know, those are your boys. So, I definitely think the Heat, I don't want to call them sleepers just because, I have them in the playoff picture, right, for the NBA. But I think you're right. They could be sleepers in the sense that I think most people will project them sort of in this 7-8, possibly 6-5 range. I think they're a little bit limited in going as high as actually being a 4 seed, just because I think the 76ers and Bucks are, another level. The Celtics are still pretty good, right? So you guys got Kemba Walker, who is not as good of an all-star as I think Kyrie Irving, but his personality and the way that he plays, I think fits better with the system that the Celtics have going on. And then the Raptors are still going to be tough, right? They went 8-2 without Leonard during a 10-game stretch last year. Kyle Lowry he's not the greatest all-star that there is, but he's still an all-star. They got still Siakam. So I think those 4 really are going to round out your top 4. And then the Pacers are still pretty good. And they picked up Malcolm Brogdon on the Pacers.
Well, you mentioned Siakam. NMSU alum, so guns up. But with that said, he really has to take a big step for this team to still be a top 4 seed in my mind. I could see the Raptors backsliding all the way to that 6 seed range.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the Nets here. So the Nets are a bit of an interesting team. They will not be with Kevin Durant this year. That's already announced. That's a done deal. We will not see Kevin Durant even if this team does make a playoff run. With that said, Kyrie Irving, when it comes to leading his own team, he's not been good. He was not good those first few years out there in Cleveland without LeBron. And then when it came to the Celtics, they were obviously a dysfunctional mess when he was on the court. And even that narrative, are the Celtics better without Kyrie? I thought there was a legitimate case to be made. I got so frustrated watching those last few games against the Bucks last year and watching him turn into Russell Westbrook before my eyes, just missing basic shots. I don't know if this guy has it in him to be the star of a team. And that's why I think Kyrie Irving's chance to succeed is next year when Kevin Durant comes back. This year, I think they've already accepted this as a bit of a wash year. And that's why you have that narrative out there that they might go after a guy like Carmelo Anthony, who we know has been done for at least the last few years.
No, I think you're definitely onto something there, right? Is we've seen that Kyrie on his own is not enough to get a team really, especially to the NBA finals, but even he's struggled to get into the playoffs, like you said, right? Like with the Cavaliers, he wasn't able to do it on his own. He needed to get LeBron James over there with him, right?
And they were like a 30-win team.
Mm-hmm. And I know he hates that narrative, right? Like that's why he wanted to leave from LeBron James's shadow and from Kevin Love, because everybody said, hey, no, LeBron just came back to help Kyrie get there, right? Kyrie was never able to do it himself. So I think you're right. So if there is a team that I do see slipping, I think the Nets. I think the Pacers, though, like I said, will still be tough. So I don't see necessarily the Heat, Magic, or Piston jumping them so much. But the Nets, I could see the argument for them slipping, even potentially falling to the 9, right? Maybe being a little bit out. But by the time they get Kevin Durant back next year, it'll be a different discussion.
I mean, the Pacers, well-coached, gritty team. Pistons, they have some star power there. Derrick Rose came back to life. You had Blake Griffin, who, again, is still recovering, but he's a legitimate star, albeit a bit of a dinosaur in today's modern NBA based around shooting. Moving off the kind of like the bottom, let's talk about that top tier of guys. So every projection I've seen, this is the 76ers title to lose. And a lot of that is based off their big offseason additions, adding Al Horford there. They did lose Jimmy Buckets, as I mentioned, which I think is going to be a noticeable loss because I'm not buying into this narrative that Ben Simmons can shoot threes now.
Yeah, he made one, and now the NBA and everybody, NBA media is freaking out. Like, Ben Simmons shoots threes. It's like, okay, he shot one of them. Like, call that out, everybody.
He has a better chance of dating another Kardashian than hitting a three in a playoff game.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't see Ben Simmons all of a sudden becoming a spot-up three-point shooter and a sniper from downtown.
Yeah, so then when we look at the Bucks this year, do you think that it's going to hurt them legitimately not having a real second star behind Giannis out there? A lot of people are even saying, could Giannis be one of the big free agent names floating around here? And I want to say this next offseason is Giannis's contract coming up. Is that right?
I want to say so. And honestly, like, that's why the Lakers have his younger brother. Like, just being honest, right? Like, the best way to tamper without actually coming out and saying we want Giannis Antetokounmpo is, hey, let's just draft or let's pick up his younger brother and keep him on our team.
That's true. But, like, Giannis definitely got exposed last year in the playoffs because his shooting game, obviously, too, needed some work. But Giannis is we legitimately call him the Greek freak. I was going to call him a freak, but he's legitimately the Greek freak. Anytime you have an MVP, we saw it with LeBron for the longest time in the East. If you have, like, one unbelievable Hall of Fame caliber star, you can dominate this conference. I love the Celtics, but I wouldn't be surprised if you told me the Celtics got beat in the first round either. I think they're going to be a more cohesive team this year. I think the offense is going to flow better through Kemba than it ever did with Kyrie. But losing Horford to your biggest rival is not something that you're going to be able to easily replace production-wise in the post. Being able to throw Horford on Joel Embiid, which is a lot of this narrative as far as the 76ers' success this year, was the only real stop defense that the Celtics had, and why you can honestly say the Celtics had ownage on the 76ers the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, without that layer of defense, who are you going to throw out on Embiid? Seriously, if you're the Celtics. They don't have a legitimate big man. Sure, they got Taco Fall, but as a rookie, someone who isn't necessarily going to have the leverage to face a physical freak like Embiid,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how this is necessarily going to work in their favor. And I'll say this about the 76ers. Their success is going to be based off Joel Embiid, not Ben Simmons.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think any of those takes are too much of a stretch, right? Is the Celtics, I think you guys got, I want to say Enes Kanter too, right?
Enes Kanter, but he's never been known for his defensive prowess. He's always been more of an offensive player, which I don't know if that's necessarily going to mean better things for the Celtics offensively, because Brad Stevens' teams have been built in their defensive game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And so you didn't really get anybody defensively that can replace Al Horford, like you were saying. Taco Fall has the size, but he's also just a little bit slow moving up the court, right? When it's got to transition and get back on defense, he's a little bit slower just because he's so freaking tall. And I just don't know if he's able to compete with the talent level of an Embiid right now.
And you can really only throw him out there for like 10 minutes at a time, if we're being honest.
Yeah, no, 100%, right? And so, yeah, I think this year is sort of the 76ers to lose, right? Like, they're not going up against a LeBron anymore. They're not going up against Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors, which even, like, they look pretty good against Kawhi and the Raptors, right? Like, if it wasn't for that buzzer beater, we might be having a different conversation right now. So I do think that the 76ers are going to need a lot out of Embiid. Embiid had ended up getting sick, I think, last year during the playoffs or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if anybody's ever heard Shannon Sharp, right? But Shannon Sharp calls him Embiid like a newborn baby because he's sick all the time and throwing up. So, which I think is the most hilarious thing. But if Embiid can stay healthy and can perform at the level that everybody knows he's capable of, I think you're exactly right. That's what's going to really help the 76ers take the East this year.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, if the 76ers don't win it, I think probably the biggest reason why is going to be their head coach, Brett Brown.
Mm-hmm.
I think that talent-wise, between Embiid, Simmons, Horford, Tobias Harris, they got the guys to throw out there. You know, another big loss that people aren't talking about when it comes to 76ers, J.J. Redick not being on this roster anymore. Losing that guy, I don't think anyone's going to be able to really replace him. Certainly not Ben Simmons.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think that helps Simmons so much is when Simmons starting to drive to the basket, right, everybody knows that, hey, the way to defend Simmons is we start to crowd the lane. So he can just dish it out to a J.J. Redick, who is one of the best three-point shooters that we've seen, right, and probably NBA history. He's not the best, but he's very good. And now you don't have that floor spacing, so you better hope that Simmons has gotten better at shooting. But I think when it comes crunch time, right, guys are going to go back to what they're used to doing, and Simmons is not used to shooting. And so if he does try to shoot in crunch time, I doubt he's going to be extremely accurate and spot on, right? So he's going to go back to driving to the basket and trying to get buckets that way. And so now, who do you have that can space the floor?
Mm-hmm. Do you buy into the narrative at all that the 76ers should move off of one of these guys, trade a Embiid or trade a Simmons?
I mean, it's a little bit difficult. I think they just extended Simmons, if I'm not mistaken.
We've seen contracts extended and then players traded like a day later.
Yeah, we have, but we'll see. And now, going back to our last topic, right? If the salary cap goes down next year, it makes it a little bit harder, though, depending on how big Simmons' extension was, right? That being said, I mean, I think your ceiling does become limited. If you're too locked in on, both of these guys and you're there, sort of like Oklahoma, right? They eventually had to move off of, they moved off of Harden, which a lot of people would argue they made the wrong choice. They should have kept Harden and KD maybe and try to replace Russ as point guard. But I could see if they're not able to do it again this year, starting to really look into, hey, who should we move off of? And I think it would probably be Simmons if they had to choose.
And, I mean, you'll probably love this, but Simmons definitely has some connections over there to a certain gentleman playing out in Los Angeles.
Yeah, which, I mean, I think it would actually work kind of well for us, though.
They play similar style ball, though.
That's the thing. And who would defend the point guard spot, right? Like, a lot of times when people talk about, being the point guard position, it's more than just being able to handle the ball. It's also the defensive half, right? Which I don't think Simmons could defend point guards all that well, just because they're quicker, smaller, and, can move around them a little bit more.
Okay. I think I'm done on the Eastern Conference myself. Obviously, it's the least exciting of the two conferences. We have less star power on any of these teams. We'll see how that bottom half of the conference shakes out, but there's not a single non-playoff team that we have here that I don't agree with or that can sneak into this top 8. No one's going to surprise me that's not in this list you already compiled for us. So with that said, are you ready to move on?
Yeah, I think so. The only thing that I'll add, right, is, and we sort of touched on it earlier, is there really is sort of the 2 tiers in this conference, right? Like you have your 76ers, Bucks, Celtics, and I think right now the Raptors, and then the Pacers, Nets, Heat, Magic, Pistons are sort of a second tier, which we know they'll probably make the playoffs, but I don't know if any of those bottom tier guys have a real shot at actually making it to the NBA Finals. I mean, it'll still be good for their franchise, right, if they make the playoffs and get to the postseason. But I think that's where we could probably leave it.
Yeah, definitely a thing about the NBA postseason is the bottom half of the conference doesn't typically have as much of a chance to pull off a major upset. Certainly not like the Major League postseason. We saw a bit of a crazy first round to get us going in this baseball discussion. So there was only really one series that didn't really pan out. We had the Yankees versus the Twins. The Twins, as we stated, had a 10-game losing streak against the Yankees going into that series. So, Dre, say it with me now, but ownage is...
Ownage is ownage.
Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous, but basically, if you're the Twins and you see the Yankees coming up on your postseason schedule, it's over. It's done. You might as well pack your bags and go home already. I don't know if I feel bad for Minnesota. They knew what they were getting into at this point with this matchup. I was hoping for a little bit more excitement, certainly when you consider this is the only series that didn't go to 5 games. But I don't know. It's a shame. I was hoping for more fireworks between, like we said on last week's pod, the 2 top home run hitting teams. But I guess that's it for that series. I guess let's move into the ones that went into 5 games. So I'm going to start off also in the American League. The Astros and the Rays happen to go to 5 games. A bit of a shocker right there when we mentioned the Rays, lowest payroll in baseball. But boy, can that team scrap. So they managed to pull off wins against Zach Greinke. And the most insane statistic about it is that Zach Greinke, his yearly salary alone was more than the entire Rays starting lineup. Ridiculous. Honestly, he made more money in that year, that fiscal year, than any of the Rays players that faced him and beat him. But the main story of the series was Garrett Cole, his dominance. He came out in Game 5, and there was never really any doubt that the Astros were going to move on to the American League Championship Series. Congratulations to Houston. Maybe next year, Rays, although I think this was a bit of a blip in the radar. For the Rays' benefit, I will throw out this statistic. Over the last decade in baseball, the Rays are actually a top 10 team in terms of wins. It just so happens in their division, they also have to play those 2 juggernauts known as the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees. That's a shame for them, especially when you go into your home ballpark in Tampa Bay. You have like 30 people in the stands, and most of them are Yankee fans.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I'm still happy for Rays. I think that's one of the coolest things that you could say, right, is in no other sport can you have the lowest paid roster actually do that well, right? Like if we're looking at, football, the lowest paid roster, I can almost guarantee you is not making the playoffs ever or even looking close. So I'm happy for the Rays. Sucks, right? Like at the end of the day, you just knew the Astros were the more talented team, right? Because they're paying for a more talented team. So you would hope that the Astros would win, right? At least if you're an Astros fan. So I'm not too surprised by the outcome, but I do want to say that the Rays, it is a really cool story to say.
Yeah, before I move into the National League side, I guess I might as well preview the American League Championship Series. So obviously we're going Houston versus the Yankees. Similar last week, going to say the Astros, top 3 team in home runs. Yankees, top 3 team in home runs. So it has a chance to have some fireworks, but what's going to be the difference maker is this Astros rotation is phenomenal. And when you can throw out Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander, and Zach Greinke, that's almost an impossible task to beat for any team. And that's why in that series against the Rays just got out-talented at a certain point. 1 through 9, anyone in the Astros lineup can honestly beat you, which is similar to what you could say about the Yankees, but I don't have as much faith in Tanaka. I don't have as much faith in Severino to be able to pull off those big games as I do in a guy who I've seen it do it before just a couple years ago, Justin Verlander, in a key spot. I think the Astros are heading into the World Series for the second time in 3 years. That's going to be my prediction. Dre, do you want to give a quick prediction for the American Championship Series?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Astros as well for all of the reasons you said.
How many games?
How many games? I'm going to say 4.
4? A sweep? You have the sweeping the Yankees.
No, okay. So it's not a 5-game series, it's 7 games?
7-game series.
Okay, sorry. Then in that case, I will say 6 games.
6 games, okay.
So,
more reasonable. I think I'll go Astros in 6 as well. All right.
Also, Alex Bregman, right? So Albuquerque native.
Woo, woo, Albuquerque.
Got to give a shout out to him. Also, my mom's favorite team and my family's favorite team. They're all from Houston. So I'm rooting for him.
Albuquerque, leading in the nation in car theft and sending one of its own to the World Series. Way to go, Albuquerque. All right, moving into the National League side of things. Man, not only NFL games, but I'm also beating you in the MLB playoffs as well, Aundre. Come on, you got to really put it together.
I'm not surprised, though, right? Like the NFL, you just get super lucky on some of your dog picks.
Oh, I get lucky. Okay.
I really want to see how many of those games you've won by like a field goal or a lack of a field goal. Something like that, especially the Rams. That one made me so upset. Anyways.
In fairness, how many did first? Yeah, okay, fine. We'll get back to it. I'll go back to trashing on your picks and beating you with dogs all day. But anyway,
it's all luck.
In the one pick in the baseball playoffs, we disagreed on the Braves-Cardinals series. The Cardinals ended up winning. And boy, did they come out firing. So game 5, 10 runs on the Atlanta Braves. They did not mess around. The most amazing stat I found about that 10-run first inning, they did not even homer. They had like four gap doubles just in that first inning and knocked the starting pitcher out after just 2 batters. Oh, it was just a beatdown from game 1. I think what it came down to is, okay, so they lost on a big walk-off home run in game 4. And for a young team like the Braves that still has a long way to go, I think that was just such a demoralizing defeat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there was any coming back from it. So I think when momentum was lost in that series, you just knew the Cardinals were going to take home this trip to the NLCS.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's the thing is, when it comes to having young talent, I think a lot of people buy too much into the talent, including myself, that a lot of times they're like, oh, that's a really talented team. But you're right. The experience sometimes is what's important. And it's hard to dig yourself out of those holes when you're a young team because nobody's done it before, right? Nobody's had the opportunity to be there to dig themselves out of that.
Well, certainly holes. All the props see if you could dig yourself out of a 10-run deficit after the first inning. Yeah. I think that's a big task, even if you told me you had the murderous row lineup in there. Similarly, we always joke about like teams that choke in the playoffs. Atlanta Braves are just one of those teams you can consistently count on going back to the 90s. But they were not the biggest choke artists of the weekend. I know a lot of people are probably expecting me just to absolutely dog on the Dodgers, dog on Clayton Kershaw right now. I could be in the pile-on community here, but I'm going to actually take this approach to it. Whenever I decided to do this show, I did want to be objective about certain topics, and I owe it to Clayton Kershaw and his legacy to actually treat this fair. Clayton Kershaw is by far a first ballot Hall of Famer. He is one of the greatest pitchers of my generation. Anytime I see him on the mound, I just fear that honestly he's going to no-hit my team. He's been that dominant for the last decade. But when it comes down to it, I don't think there's any getting around it that he is the most unclutch player in sports, not just baseball, sports. Because you look at some of these statistics, he has, in the Major League playoffs, almost a 2-run higher ERA. If you're unfamiliar with baseball terms, ERA, runs allowed per 9 innings, almost 2 runs more he gives up in the playoffs than he ever has in a 12-year Major League career. When you look at his postseason ERA after the 7th inning, it's over 12. This playoffs, 7.33 or 7.11, my mistake. He almost gives up double the amount of home runs he gives up in the postseason compared to the regular season. Basically, to summarize what happened in Game 5, Walker Buehler, who is now the Dodgers' ace, pitched an outstanding game. 6 2/3 innings, dominant performance, 1 run, 7 Ks. And then Dave Roberts, the Dodgers manager, decided, I'm going to bring in Clayton Kershaw. He finished out the 7th inning, no problem. And then Dave Roberts decided to throw him back out there for the 8th inning. Over the course of 4 pitches, he gave up back-to-back home runs to both Anthony Rendon and to Juan Soto. And the sad part is he has only given up home runs on back-to-back pitches twice, and both times have been in the postseason. I don't think there's any debate about it. Clayton Kershaw just can't get it done in the postseason. And I can't name anyone else in sports that has a worse legacy in that regard.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And that's the thing, right, is if it's like happening every now and again, you get some guys where I think they get this, sort of negative stereotype or stigma attached to them, which if you look at it statistically, you're just like, hey, that's just simply not true. But this has been a trend Kershaw's entire career in the MLB, right? Like it's not, hey, it was sort of like that when he was a rookie, right? Or even just a young player, right? His first 5 years in the league or something, and he's sort of grown out of it. It just continues to be an issue. And I think now you have to say that he is just not a good postseason player, right? Like he can help get you to the postseason, absolutely, right? He can help get you wins in the regular season. But when it comes to the postseason, you know that he's going to choke, and he does it consistently. And maybe it's a mental thing for him. I don't know what it is. I don't know if we found the reason for it, but you know that it is happening, and it is still a consistent trend.
Well, I think that's the conundrum that the Dodgers franchise is in. We mentioned, could you trade Kershaw? What would be the right move to do with Kershaw on your roster? Because you mentioned he is putting you in this position to even be the number 1 seed, to get to the playoffs year after year because of the performances he's putting out there. Is he as good as he used to be? No, he is definitely taken a step back. His fastball's not what it used to be. He can't throw 97 by you anymore. But this is going to be the first time since like his rookie year that he finished with a +3 ERA. And even with that, 3.02. That's it for this year's regular season. He's had a little bit of back issues, but when it comes to the playoffs, you legitimately think about, I don't feel comfortable putting on the postseason roster. I think you kind of just put yourself in a position where it's like, we just have to keep throwing him out there and hope something changes.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's the thing is he's also become a fan favorite, right? So fans love him. At least they did. Now they might not, but they used to.
If you're the Dodgers, you have to think this was probably one of your best shots to win the World Series.
Yeah, and we even said that last week, right? As we had said, hey, we think the Dodgers are basically a lock to make it to the World Series again. And we were even talking about, hey, if you make it enough times, you're bound to win it at some point, right? And now they're not there. So, yeah, I don't know what you do with Kershaw. I think they have to almost keep him on the roster. But if there's a way that you can have him help you out in the regular season and then not play him much in the postseason, like I think that's what you almost have to do, even though it's a weird conundrum, right?
And be honest here. I was fair in my little monologue about Clayton Kershaw. I was honest. I didn't pull any punches or take any cheap shots here. And that's coming from a Giants fan. Mm-hmm. If anything, I'm not going to crush Clayton Kershaw as much as I want to crush their manager, Dave Roberts. Because why are you throwing him out there in the 8th inning? Mm-hmm. Like, what are you doing? You have a pretty good bullpen if you're the Dodgers. And you've heard the term thrown around there, a positionless fastball in the NBA. I guess you could consider it designationless pitching staffs right now in the MLB because you've seen starters come in relief and do that. But Clayton Kershaw is not that guy. He's not that Madison Bumgarner to come in and close out the World Series with 5 innings in relief. like I mentioned, I don't buy too much into the 7th inning plus overall if you're throwing him out there in relief. But the second he gave up that first home run to Rendon, Dave Roberts, you should have already had someone warming up in the pen to come relieve him. You should not even had him in that opportunity to face Juan Soto, one of the best young players in Major League Baseball, to even give up that second home run. And granted, he didn't lose the game because they went into extra innings. And Howie Kendrick was the one who hit the grand slam to walk it off. Or not walk it off, but at least put them in the lead. If you're the Dodgers, you didn't do Clayton Kershaw any favors with this decision.
Yeah, and it's just a sad situation for the Dodgers. I honestly feel bad for them and their fans, right? To have one of the best, probably, runs and stretches here in at least recent MLB history, and to not make it to a World Series again, right? To not win the World Series, but now you're not even making it, right? Is embarrassing. And you said the decisions were what led to it.
And I had this conversation on Facebook with a friend who we disagree about on certain sports topics as well. He was a little bit bitter after this and made the argument to me as a Giants fan. Well, hey, your Giants haven't even made the playoffs the last few years. Yeah, I get that. But at the end of the day, I will gladly take the rings that my Giants organization has over the last decade to this abyss of the last 30 years that the Dodgers have been stuck in. Because if you look back at franchises that have a bit of a legacy of choking in the postseason, I mentioned the Braves earlier in the 90s. If you told anyone on that team, how many pennants or division titles would you have given up to win a couple more rings? Or if you told anyone on that 90 through 94 Buffalo Bills teams, would you have gone to one Super Bowl if you knew you would win it versus going to those 4 Super Bowls consecutively, knowing you lost all 4? I think the choice is obvious. You would take the title each and every time.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is when you're constantly losing, you almost get the reputation of being the next worst, right? Of being a consistent loser and consistent runner-up. And something even going back to our high school, right? I hate going back to high school and talking about, the high school days, right? But we, at Manzano High School here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, we were always making it to the state playoffs in something, and, we would do very well in wrestling, basketball, football, and we never won a state title while we were there. And Manzano High School became known as, hey, these are the runner-ups, right? And we would gladly have, I think, traded all of the times that we went for just one actual championship in one of those sports to not be known as the runner-ups. And I think it's the exact same thing at any level, right? Whether it's the NCAAs or moving on to the pros in any sport, is you would gladly trade that title of, oh, you're just the runner-ups for, hey, no, I was a champion at least one of those times.
Because at the end of the day, no one remembers the runner-up. In 10 years, if you ask me who made it to the Super Bowl versus who won the Super Bowl, I'm going to definitely remember the champion a lot more than who they played. Unless I have a personal tie or connection to the Super Bowl, or maybe now that I'm in this industry, of course I'll remember it. But for the casual viewer, the casual fan, they're not going to be able to they couldn't tell you the last 10 Super Bowl losers. Ask them who won the Super Bowl in the last 10 years, they might be able to give you an honest answer.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And there's no trophy presented to you for being the runner-up, right? You don't get to hoist a new banner for being a runner-up. And it's just the honest truth, right? You don't get rings and trophies for being runner-ups. And those are the major things that'll sell on fans, right? Nobody wants to have we're runner-up t-shirts, right? We're 5-time runner-ups. They'd rather have the 1-year World Series champs, right? Than the 5-year runner-ups.
If you're the Dodgers, though, you'll have other opportunities. This isn't it for you. You have a team that consists of Corey Seager, Cody Bellinger, Walker Buehler, Ryu, even Kershaw. If he's your 4th best starter on your team's doing pretty damn good. So as much as I hate to play you, as much as I hate to see your success, keep doing it. You're going to be in the playoffs consistently for the next decade as long as you keep this team together. I think you might have to make a change at manager eventually. I don't think this is really working out for you. Some of the decisions that are getting made with your team, especially in-game situations like this one. But if you hang in there, if you keep putting yourself in the playoffs enough times, you're probably eventually going to pull one down, and I'll just have to live with the results on my end. Actually focusing on who won the series, I think the Nationals deserve all the praise in the world. To come in as the underdog, the very, very big underdog, and pull down a win in a year where you lost your franchise player. He signs with not only another team, but another team in your division in the Philadelphia Phillies. I'm talking about Bryce Harper again this week. Wow, it is incredible. So as of this podcast, they won game 1 of the NLCS as well. They're up 1-0 against the Cardinals. If they make it to the World Series, it's not just Clayton Kershaw's legacy that might be on the line. Bryce Harper, his legacy is going to take a huge hit leaving this team that he never got past the first round. And now they have a legitimate shot of making the World Series. 2 underdogs that won out of the first round. Quick prediction, you want to throw me who wins and how many games this goes? Knowing that the Nationals already have a 1-0 lead?
Yeah, I'm going to take the Nationals. One, just playing the odds, right? But also the fact that they were able to beat the Dodgers is really impressive, such a talented team. And also because I originally didn't have the Cardinals even making it. So I'm going to go with the Nationals, and I will say I'll do another 6 game.
I'm actually going to pick the Nationals in 5, and I'm going to throw it out there. So in your lineup, you have your 3-4 hitters between Soto and Rendon, amazing hitters. You have old veteran, crafty veteran Ryan Zimmerman hanging around on that roster still. And then those 2 guys at the top of your rotation between Strasburg and Scherzer, they're going to be hard to beat. Throw in Corbin in there too. And the great part about this for them, neither of those guys even pitched in game 1. So watch out. I think this is going to be the Nationals' year to make it to the World Series. Whether they could beat any of those teams coming out of the American League is going to be one of the big ways that their season is going to be judged. But I don't see them going past the Astros or Yankees. Great story nonetheless. Congrats to the Nationals. All right, I think it's time that we get into some NFL action this week. So let's pull up the games right now. So the first one of the weekend, obviously, Thursday Night Football. Danny Dimes is not apparently the heir apparent to Eli Manning, as he does not have nearly as much success against the Patriots.
Yeah, and at first the game started out sort of close in the first quarter, and I was like, oh, maybe it'll be an interesting game. But then I think it ended up basically how everybody thought it would. Patriots went on to dominate, and the Giants, looked sort of just like the Giants. I think, Eli's still going to be benched. Daniel Jones is still going to be the starter, but the Patriots just did what the Patriots do and beat bad teams.
Pretty much at this point. I understand. So they're 6-0, obviously, but their matchups haven't exactly been against the most quality opponents, to say the least. I think next week they play the Jets, and granted the Jets do get Darnold back, but I think that's another matchup that we can already chalk up as a W for the Patriots.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And this, I will beat this drum until I die, but the Patriots have always had an easy schedule just because their division has been so inept, right? And again, they have the easiest schedule in the NFL, and that is what helps them get to, honestly, the Super Bowl year after year. When you have that easy of a schedule, it helps you get that bye.
I'll counter it a little bit here. There's a lot of teams or worse organizations that couldn't even do themselves a favor and beat these bad teams.
Yes, that is true. So I think you're right. I'm not saying that's all of it, right? You do have to give your credit. They build very good teams. They have an incredible system over there. Bill Belichick, even though, they've been caught cheating, he is actually a very smart coach. I don't even think he would have to have cheated and able to, win as many rings as he has. And so, yes, you're right. It does take a certain amount of talent in both the front office and on the field, right, to come up with, the amount of wins that they have and the amount of success that they've had. But you can't deny that because of all the buys that they've had when it comes to the playoffs, right? You just get the easier side of the bracket when you have that much success because you constantly get to beat up on bad teams.
But you can also say that when they do get to the playoffs, again, Harris is going to hate hearing this, but you look at some of the teams they've had to play in the playoffs. They've played good Steelers teams, good Chargers teams, certainly good Broncos teams, and they've managed to come out the better in those matchups. You still have to win those games. So
Yes, but it's also easier to win those hard games when you've had the extra rest, right? When you've had the bye and your body is not as beat up as it is because you've been playing these easy scrub teams.
Well, easy teams or not, I think you definitely have to give a shout out to this Patriots defense.
Mm-hmm.
It is imposing its will on other teams to the point of breaking them. I don't think we've seen as many teams this dominant on one half of the ball as they are. And you also have to factor in the Patriots have a pretty good quarterback on the other side of the football, don't they?
Yeah, no, I mean, this Patriots team, so far, they seem well-rounded. And that's the thing is we haven't quite seen them tested this season. And so I'm hoping it's not a everybody's jumping on the bandwagon, right? Just like we sort of did with the Cowboys. Though I think the Patriots are a little bit more sustainable. I think they're just better, a better organization than the Cowboys. They're better coached than the Cowboys. So I think what we're seeing is more sustainable than what we've seen with Cowboys. But again, at the same time, they played a lot of bad teams, so the defense can look extremely good. But I do think that it is more sustainable.
Okay, I think it'd probably be good for our listeners to just kind of go through what the Patriots have next on their schedule. So they're going to play the Jets. We already talked about that. Should be an easy matchup for them. They face the Browns in Foxborough. Belichick against these younger quarterbacks under 25. He has a great history against them. Ravens, same thing against a young quarterback of Lamar Jackson. Eagles are probably going to be their next big test. Then they face the Eagles and Cowboys actually in back-to-back weeks. That's where we're going to learn a lot about them. Texans, Chiefs. So from the weeks of November 17th all the way up until the first week in December, they're going to be playing some playoff level competition. So if you want a barometer of how good this Patriots team really is, that's going to be your time to really test it out. As far as the Giants side of things, Daniel Jones looked good. I mean, in a bad game, he did throw enough interceptions. I say good in the sense I know what was around him. He was missing Evan Ingram in that game. He was missing Saquon Barkley in that game. He did get Golden Tate back, but he also had Sterling Shepard out of that game. You start putting some weapons around this guy, I think he's actually might be surprising. I know I did a complete 180 from the second episode of our show all the way up until a few weeks ago when Daniel Jones made his debut. But I've liked what I see. He just passes the eye test right now that I actually get to see him on the field.
Yeah, no, I agree. So again, another apology, Daniel Jones. You've made fools out of us, so you're doing a fantastic job. And like you said, he didn't have all the weapons around him, and sometimes you need your young quarterbacks to play in these games where you're playing against, guys that have been to Super Bowls, right? When you're playing against the Tom Brady's and the Patriot defense. And it's a part of the growing process. And the fact that Daniel Jones still did okay without having some of his best weapons around him and playing the returning Super Bowl champions, I think he's doing a fantastic job. There's not much more you can ask from such a young rookie quarterback, especially taking over from Eli Manning, who, has 2 rings himself, right? And for a long time has been your franchise quarterback. And so he's doing a great job. I think the Giants this year, I still don't see them doing much, right? Like I don't see them in the playoff picture. But, a few good draft picks, and I could see them there in the short future.
I'll throw this out there to you. Cowboys are 3-2. Eagles are 3-2. And you have the Giants just sticking around there at 2-4. There's some things that could break right if you're a Giants fan. You might get lucky.
You could, right? Like there is the possibility that they get lucky. I still think those 2 teams are very tough though, right? Like the Cowboys, even though they're not as tough as Cowboys fans thought after week 3, they're still a very tough team. And then we all know that this Eagles team, right, very, very much has the potential to make it to a Super Bowl. Will they? That's questionable, but they have the talent and potential too.
They're playing much better. All right, so I'm not going to do another bad London accent for this one, albeit I'll say this. Both yours and mine are infinitely better than Eris's.
Is he awful at British accents?
Oh, my God. Eris, much love to you, bro. I apologize for making you do that on the Fantasy Football Show. I will not do that to you again. Much love from Choo Choo on that one, but it sounded like this weird Lucky Charms kind of Shrek hybrid. I'm my bad, bro. I made a mistake.
Yeah, no more accents for Eris. And we love Eris. This is why we love him, but no more accents.
You roast the ones you love, guys. You roast the ones you love. All right. So as far as the game here, set your alarm bright and early for this one. If you're on the West Coast, this game will take place on 6:30 a.m. Sunday morning. We have the Panthers as the away team going to face the Buccaneers in jolly old London. Close enough. Satisfied with that one. Kyle Allen, fourth start this season. Can he keep it up against the Buccaneers?
For me, this game seems almost like a 50-50 game. I think I'm actually going to take the Buccaneers. The Panthers have looked good with Kyle Allen. I think the time change is going to be a big deal for him. And so
Same thing. They're both East Coast teams.
They're both East Coast teams, but when you're, a rookie, right, and you're young as a quarterback and, you've never traveled before or you don't travel all that much, I think it has a little bit bigger of an impact, right? So whereas Winston, he's been in the league before, and I don't know if he's ever played in London before. But...
Okay, I'll counter though. Like Kyle Allen actually technically isn't a rookie. He was on the roster last year. Last year he was an undrafted rookie.
Okay, so you're right. So I guess it's his first year really starting, but not technically his rookie year, sophomore season. I'll still take Jameis Winston. The Buccaneers have also started to look a little bit better. They did beat the Rams, obviously, right, that we saw. So I'm going to go with the Buccaneers.
All right. It's a 2.5-point line, too, I should state. I'm actually going to go with the Panthers. I just don't see a good way the Buccaneers defense is going to stop Christian McCaffrey in this matchup. And basically, I just love what I'm seeing from the Panthers on the defensive side of the ball as well. We're seeing that they clearly have the pieces, and that's why we're starting to have this argument whether Kyle Allen could replace Cam right now. It's a legitimate possibility, folks. You mentioned Jameis might have the maturity. Are you sure about that? Are we really going to bank on Jameis being the more mature one here?
I did say maturity. I said experience, right? There could be a slight difference.
He has experience in Uber rides, but I'm not going to trust him in the car with me either.
I guess that's true. No, you bring up very good points. I still like my pick. I'm going the Buccaneers.
All right. So we're opposed on that one. Going into this next one, the Browns need a bounce back week in the worst way. So they are welcoming into town Seattle. Are they going to get reprieve being on their home field this week while traveling to go to the West Coast and then come back home too, coming on a short week off Monday night? Granted, I'll say this. They didn't even really play Monday night as evidenced by the score.
Yeah, and I don't know what's going on with the Browns. There's some games they look really good. There's some games they look really bad. The Seahawks, I think, right now are just the better team, right? But you never know what happens when you go to play someone on their home turf. I think I'll go. I guess do you know who's the underdog in this one?
Okay, so Seattle actually is a 1.5-point favorite.
Seattle's the 1.5-point favorite. Make this my dog pick. I'll take the Browns.
That's fair. Dog pick for the doghouse. Okay. Woo woo. Mm-hmm. I'm actually going to go with the Browns too. And I'm going to throw that out there just because, again, this team just needs a bounce back in the worst possible way. I think they're going to throw at Odell 20 times in this matchup, to be honest, because they just need to fix everything. Just rub the stink off of this matchup. And I know that the Seahawks obviously added Jadeveon Clowney, but their pass rush isn't really scaring anyone. There's no one on the Seattle side of the ball certainly coming at Baker Mayfield with the ferocity that Nick Bosa had in this last one. If Freddie Kitchens doesn't hold them back, we'll see. All right, next matchup up, I will be disappointed if there isn't 80-plus points scored in this game. So the Texans, coming off their huge week, are going into Arrowhead. And I was shocked to see that the Chiefs lost to the Colts this Sunday night. But it happens. Even though I had the Chiefs going 14-2, the important number was that 2 losses. Sometimes you just get beat in the NFL, especially in a primetime game. But yeah. I still have the Chiefs as one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL. Their defense has always scared me. It scared everyone going into the season too. But I'll still give them the win against the Texans.
Yep, I totally agree. I'm still going to go with the Chiefs, right? They're playing in Arrowhead, one of the tougher places to play. Their offense can always keep them in a game, doesn't matter who it's with, right? So even if their defense gives up a lot of points, their offense will usually more than make up for it. I
If you
think
have any, yeah. Okay. I was just gonna say, if you have any fancy football players in this
oh yeah.
game,
Oh yeah, you're getting points, right? Hopkins is gonna pop off probably, and Tyreek Hill or whoever else, right? That plays for the Chiefs, Mahomes, right? You're popping off this week, so it's gonna be a fun game. I think there is something, right? Like nobody really goes. It's very hard to go undefeated in the NFL, like you were saying earlier. So yes, I think is maybe a little bit surprising who the Chiefs lost to, but at the same time, I expected that the Chiefs were gonna lose at some point this year. So
I mean, I'm not so proud to say that it's not like my Niners aren't going to get beat this year. The Patriots are going to get beat. Teams just lose to bad teams sometimes. Not to say that the Colts are a bad team, but it happens a ton in the NFL.
mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I'm going with the Chiefs. You're going with the Chiefs as well.
Mm-hmm.
4.5 point line. Do we see the Chiefs going over that, under that?
Just because they lost last week and they've had some games that are closer than I would like them to have, I'll take the under and I'll say it's a field goal game.
I think the Chiefs are going to pop off this week. I'm going to go over that line. All right. Tank Bowl 2019 taking place. We have a combined 9 losses between these two teams. And I don't even know how to collectively count the amount of tears these two teams have caused to their respective fan bases, but it's definitely enough to fill a few oceans. I don't know if I want to even go first on this one. Oh, I went first in this last one. Perfect. All the pressure is on you, Dre. Who's going to get their first win of the season? One of these teams has to win.
I mean, well now, right? Like the worst time to fire Jay Gruden is right before you go into an actual game that you might win with Jay Gruden, right?
Washington's the 3.5 point favorite too.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Washington. Like I said, they showed some signs of life in that first week. It's more signs of life than I've seen, out of the Dolphins, really. So that's really going to be my only reason. But who knows? They might switch up quarterbacks this week and have a fourth quarterback that will throw things off. So I'm going to go with the Redskins. And I really do think that the Dolphins are in full tank mode, right? Like they know what they're doing. They know that they're not very talented right now, because they've traded away a lot of that talent, and I think they're okay with
that. This just reminds me of that episode of South Park where both teams are trying to lose.
Yeah.
So they just start like, "Oh, your team's horrible. My team's worse than you. We're going to totally get our ass kicked by you." That's exactly how this game is going to go.
Do you think there's the potential for fantasy players to pop off in this game? I mean,
actually,
they're both so bad, right?
Actually, I did. Yeah, I put Josh Rosen as a sleeper pick this week. Mm-hmm. And I think, honestly, both teams have a chance. I've heard the Washington Redskins defense is a popular streamer this week as well. It's funny because this is just where fantasy and the real life game just kind of like go in two separate directions, because your eyes and ears tell you when you watch this game that this is a matchup devoid of talent. But if you look at some of the players that are going to put up points this week, they're going to be placed on both Miami and Washington Redskins rosters. All right, I guess it's time for my pick. I'm going to go with the Redskins, not because of anything they've shown me on the field, purely because there's a weird trend that I've always noticed in sports when you fire a head coach. The following week, the team just seems to play with a different type of energy. And I think it just may have actually came at the right time for them in this matchup. Like I said, I don't even know what the Redskins are doing. They're not tanking for Tua because they drafted a quarterback. So I don't think it's important for them to get the number 1 pick. I think this win actually might mean more to the players and fans. So give me the Redskins. And 2.5, I don't know. I'm hoping for meteor, honestly, in this game. All right. So Kirk Cousins, again, last week we had a huge, tough discussion about him. We did mention that he was in the right matchup, right time to face the Giants, who have a pretty terrible defense in their own right. So he had a decent day. He fed Adam Thielen the ball, but he kind of ignored Stephon Diggs. That's probably the biggest news coming out of this week for that team. Is Stephon Diggs going to have a big week to kind of counteract everything? They're facing the Eagles at home. Vikings are a 3-point favorite. Where do you see this one going? Well, I guess actually, never mind. I'm taking first because you went first in Tank Bowl. Give me the Eagles. It's a tough one. It's a bit of a toss-up game for me. It may even be a coin flip, to be honest. But I'm going to go with the Eagles.
Okay, so then in that case, I will take the Vikings, though I'm not very confident, right? We just talked about how overpaid Kirk Cousins is, right, for the level of output that he's producing. Though I do think that you're right. He's going to start trying to at least perform a lot better because he's gotten so much criticism. And I think we're going to see Stephon Diggs get, into sort of a little bit of groove here in this game. Adam Thielen, I think, is still going to be a major factor. Dalvin Cook, all that. So give me the Vikings at home. Like you said, it's a coin flip game. I could very easily see the Eagles winning this, but I'll take the Vikings just to be different.
So a bit of quick math right now. So one Daryl Morey tweet is worth 4 Kirk Cousins contracts.
That is true. Which I don't know which you would rather have. Would you rather have the Daryl Morey tweet or waste the money on 4 Kirk Cousins?
No, I think that's something for some poor executive to make a decision on. Maybe if Daryl Morey's NBA career comes to an end, he could find a job in the NFL as the Vikings GM.
Going just real quick back to the Daryl Morey thing, like, if you're the owners of the Houston Rockets, how, upset are you that one tweet is causing the end of the world for you? Like, I would be so pissed. Like, one tweet, literally 6 to 7 words, and it's the end of the world. Like, you might lose your franchise.
In fairness, I've ruined relationships on less words than 7, so...
I guess, fair enough. Okay, back to the topic at hand. Let's go back to football.
All right, absolutely. So last week, also Teddy Bridgewater had a big week. The Saints are rolling without Drew Brees right now. They're heading on to Duval right now this week as they're going to be facing the Jacksonville Jaguars. Minshew Mania got his first loss. He took the first L against Kyle Allen this week. Do you think the Jags will be able to bounce back at home? Still lingering over this team, and we really haven't given him much buzz, but the Jalen Ramsey topic is still out there. He's probably going to miss another week, and if anything, that's good news for the Saints.
Mm-hmm. No, I think the Saints, they look really good right now. The same thing, right? Like, I don't think the Saints are going to go undefeated the rest of the season, so I could see them taking a loss here or there, though I think they're good enough right now to beat Jacksonville. So I will take the Saints in this matchup,
Okay.
And I have them winning by 3.
The Jags are actually a favorite going into this game, too. They're a 2.5-point favorite at home. A surprising thing I will say about Jacksonville, too, over the last 3 years, they've been one of the best home NFL defenses, and I don't think Teddy Bridgewater could play out of his mind again for a third straight week in a row. Give me the Jags. I think that this might be a good matchup for them. Yeah, Jacksonville against the Saints. Like I said, I don't know if this Teddy Bridgewater magical run can continue all the way till Drew Brees is back without any losses. If it does, then the Saints are going to be in the Super Bowl. That's simple as it is when you just throw Drew Brees back in that mix. All right. Next matchup up. So the Bengals are also throwing their hat into the ring to be the NFL's worst team right now. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with their trade situations coming up with players like A.J. Green. But they're heading into Baltimore as 11-point dogs to the Ravens. I think Lamar is going to have a field day picking apart this defense. I'm going to go with the Ravens. I don't know if I'm going to go over that line. I'm going to go just under that. I'm going to say that the Ravens win by 10.
Yeah, so I wasn't too impressed with the Ravens last week, especially because, the Steelers had another starting quarterback go out, right, and go down. And the Steelers still almost won that game. And so that being said, I still think that the Ravens win this. So I don't have them covering that line, but I think they're going to win. They're just all around better than the Bengals. And at this point, if you're the Bengals, you've lost to the second worst team in the division, being the Steelers. There's not really much of a reason to try anymore. You're out of the running for anything. I mean, there is some pride aspect, right? But I think the Ravens are going to beat them.
Yeah. The Bengals are done. They're looking for their franchise quarterback too, so throw their hat into the ring to drafting a quarterback in the top 5 at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Next matchup on our docket right now. So the Falcons, who are probably one of the most surprising bad teams in the NFL, will be heading on the road to face the Arizona Cardinals, 1-3-1. Atlanta's a 2.5-point favorite on the road. And I know that the Cardinals are bad. My mind tells me the Cardinals are bad. But I'm going to go with the Cardinals at home. Just for the very fact that this defense for the Falcons is so bad. Like, I was watching very intently on that game last week between them and the Texans, mostly because I had like fantasy implications. I had Will Fuller, who was just going ham in that game. But if this air raid offense is ever going to have a chance to shine, this is going to be the week. Going against that team. Like, I saw this video that's trending on YouTube or on Twitter of just Deshaun Watson talking about, like, picking apart the thing. Is like, oh, just throwing the guys. They were just open, left, right, up the middle. Running back would run 5 yards on them. Offensive lineman take it to the house. Man, it didn't matter. I could just throw on this Falcons D offense all day. And the sad part about it, couldn't believe that was a real quote after watching that game. So, yeah, go ahead and give me the Cardinals in the upset.
Yeah, so, I mean, I was close to picking the Cardinals as well. They're not a good team, but I think they might be better than the Falcons. The Falcons, I just don't know what to do with. Like, they have some very good, very talented players, right, that you could see, oh, the Falcons should win a lot more of their games than they do. But just looking at what they've done, the Falcons have been very bad. And like you said, their defense is awful. It's atrocious. But that being said, I'm going to be a little bit different than you, and so I'll go the Falcons.
Fair enough. You know, you have to pick up some ground somewhere, right?
Yeah, or lose more ground. So.
Okay. Well, let's see here. Moving in, so we're starting into the afternoon games right now. So that was our first afternoon game there with the Cardinals-Falcons. We had a very successful strategy last week when it came to the Titans game of just picking separate picks here. Okay, so you went first last week on picking it, so I think it would be unfair for me to not go with the same opportunity of me picking first on here. Do we just want to split this one again? Because we're not having any success picking Titans games otherwise.
Yeah, I think so. I'll take it first. I'll go with the Titans, though I'm sure they're going to find some way to spite me and lose. So okay. I'm not confident.
Okay, just clarify because we didn't even announce who they're facing. So, equally frustrating team for me to pick, but the Broncos. I actually picked them to get their first win last week, and I was right.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the first time that I've picked them, they haven't lost on a last-second game-winning field goal. So, thank you, Denver. Thank you for giving that to me at least.
Yeah. Is it so much that we expected Denver to be good, or more we expected that the Chargers were going to find a way to lose this game?
The Chargers just play down to their competition. I don't know what it is, but you remember last week I was kind of back and forth on the decision before pulling the trigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember.
It was just in the back of my head. I was like, Phillip Rivers, big game. Well, not even big game. Low-level game against a mediocre opponent. Will he play like a elite quarterback? No.
And yeah, the Chargers are just disappointing. I'm sorry, Harris, but you guys let me down again.
It's crazy. It's just like you can, like I think I said it on a Twitter poll. I don't know if I've said it in a podcast before. Who do you trust more, Tekashi 6ix9ine with your secrets or Phillip Rivers in a clutch spot?
I mean, probably Tekashi 6ix9ine. He gives me more hope.
To tie it into the rest of the podcast, Phillip Rivers or Clayton Kershaw? Both LA-based players.
I'm going to go with Kershaw, but just because he's actually made it there, right? Like he's actually made it to the World Series.
That's true. We have never seen Phillip Rivers in a championship game.
Yeah. So that's going to be my only reasoning, but
both players get bombed by Boston-based franchises, so when the postseason, so they have that in common.
Yeah, maybe they hang out on weekends or something.
Maybe.
How many kids does Kershaw have?
I don't know, but it not nearly as enough to really have a play date with the Rivers family.
I would hope not.
Maybe Cromartie and him hang out. I'd like to think in the future, in 10 to 15 plus years, we're going to legitimately see a team based entirely off of Philip Rivers' family and Antonio Rogers Cromartie's family going head to head.
Oh, I believe it. Like, I can totally see it. It's just a bunch of their little mini-me's playing on one team together.
It's a simple dream, but it's one that I have.
Yeah, all the cheerleaders too. Might as well make it cheerleaders. All the sisters. Like,
hey, we talked about it a few weeks ago. Carly Lloyd's pushing to be the NFL's first female kicker. Maybe by that time we'll just have a multi-gendered sport.
Yeah, all of Cromartie's and Rivers's.
Okay, we're getting sidetracked, but a lot of fun. But all right, so. Oh, boy. So we talked about the Cowboys getting off of these easy teams into legitimate opponents. Well, guess what? They're back to easy teams as they'll be going on the road to face the New York Jets this week. 7-point line for Dallas. On the bright side, if you're the Jets, Sam Darnold probably won't die, as he put it, and he'll be back there on the field. First week coming off a major illness, no matter how much we joke about mono and how he ended up getting it, it still is a legitimate thing, and at least he's back there on the field. The Jets are going to play much better, but they're not going to play nearly at the level of this Dallas team. Dallas needs this win bad. Give me Dallas covering that spread.
Oh, yeah. I 100% agree with you. I think we're going to see Dallas come in, whoop the Jets, even though the Jets are a bad team, and then you're going to hear all the Cowboys fans saying, "We done boys again." And
Dak's going to throw 5 touchdowns. We're going to get to hear about his contract again. Granted, on this show, at some point, we're probably going to have to talk about Dak's contract too, but we're going to stall that as much as we can because I'm sure if you're listening to sports media right now, you're so tired of that subject at this point.
Yeah, I forget who it was. Somebody was on one of the major sports media shows, and they're like, "Do we really have to talk about the Cowboys again?" And just came up straight out and said it. And they're like, "Yeah, unfortunately, that's on the docket." So, so we're going to skip over them. I think, again, they're going to win this game.
All right. So, I mean, arguably, honestly, the game of the week, and I don't mean this as a biased fan to say it, but the Niners are going on the road to face the Los Angeles Rams, and this is a big week for the Rams coming off that loss to the Seattle Seahawks. If they go 3-3 and they're a couple games behind the Niners and the Seahawks, that's it for their season.
Mm-hmm.
And this pains me to say this, but all the odds stack up in the Rams' favor for this matchup. So the Rams played last Thursday. They get the mini bye in this situation. Then you have on the opposing end of that, the Niners played on Monday night. With that said, that combines for a matchup in favor of the Rams. I'm going to go with the Rams. Vegas has a 3-point line right now. This is going to be the first week I don't pick my Niners, which I don't know if that's going to jinx them. Guess we'll see. Going with the Rams. Pains me, but
yeah, I'm also going with the Rams. I think they need a bounce back week, and the 49ers, they've surprised me every single week. I think I've picked against them every single week, and they've proven me wrong every single week. But I do think this is sort of where their undefeated streak comes to an end. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like we talked about, is that it's very hard in the NFL to go undefeated. Like very rarely do you get an undefeated season. And in fact, in my time, I think I can only remember the Patriots went undefeated one year.
It's only happened twice in NFL history: the Patriots and the '72 Dolphins.
Yeah.
So once again, let's see here. So the Niners are going to lose their thing. So when the Patriots get into their tougher schedule, once again, the 72 Dolphins are going to get to uncork that champagne in Don Shula's restaurant and drink to another team not going undefeated. Such a petty tradition, but honestly, that they drink to every team that loses their undefeated streak. But hey, whatever. Traditions are traditions. I think it's going to be interesting. Is the tradition going to continue of ripping Eris's team? Because Sunday night's going to be a big one for you guys. Another game where the house is divided in Slumpbuster media. Yep. So he told me you guys plan on doing the fantasy football pod together after this one. Who's going to have bragging rights when it's all said and done?
So the sad thing is, right, like the Chargers might find a way to lose against the Steelers, and I know the Steelers are very bad right now, but there's no way that I could pick them. I have to go with the Chargers. I mean, the Chargers actually have a starting quarterback and not a practice team practice squad quarterback. I want to say Hodges, who's starting this week for the Steelers. He played actually decent, right? But they basically resorted to Wildcat offense, which really is not an NFL offense. It's basically hey, this is our last resort, and we don't want to rely too much on our quarterback. And that's basically what the Steelers did last week. I expect to see a lot of the same, but they're also going to be missing Washington is out at the wide receiver spot. Obviously, they don't have Big Ben. Mason Rudolph is gone. And so I think just injuries alone, this is just a bad season for the Steelers, and I think they're going to lose this game too.
Okay. I mean, that's a tough decision for you, and I get it. Well, I'm not going to go against the Chargers again. As much as I know they play bad against bad teams for whatever reason, they just don't play up to their talent. They have a talented roster. They cannot lose in their home stadium again, regardless if it's a soccer stadium. You know the worst part about it, though? The Steelers fan base is a huge fan base that goes across the nation and travels well. You know that stadium is going to be rocking entirely Steelers fans.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be all black and, our shade of yellow, right? Not the Chargers, yellow and blue, right? So it's going to be all Steelers. Doesn't mean they're going to win, but there'll be a lot of Steelers fans.
At some point, we're going to have to come to the point where we're going to throw Aaron's a bone. We're going to talk about this stadium situation for the Chargers because it's starting to get desperate and sad right now, their time in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Monday night, that surprising unexpected team out of Detroit is going to be playing in Lambeau against the Packers. They're coming off a bye week, so that's going to work in their favor. Get a bit of an extended bye week, too, playing on Monday night as well. So the last time we saw the Lions play, they gave the Chiefs a hell of a run. Will they be able to do that against the Packers? Because if we're going to say ownage is ownage for the Twins versus the Yankees, Aaron Rodgers has dominated this Lions franchise for years. Regardless if he's playing at Aaron Rodgers MVP type levels or not, I can foresee the Green Bay Packers still winning this game.
Yeah. No, I think the Green Bay Packers, that's who I've got winning this game, especially playing in Lambeau, right? It's a whole nother environment. And I think the Lions, like we've said, they were an underrated, very scrappy team that a lot of people we were thinking, slept on them. And they are just that. Like, they're very underrated. They're a very tough team, in my opinion. But are they better than the Packers? I don't think. And are they better than the Packers playing in Lambeau? I definitely don't think so. So give me the Packers.
Well, you better hope so. You put them in your top 10. It's a bit too rich for my blood, but okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think they've proven to me that they're a really good team.
So the only thing I'll counter you on is, so you had them ahead of the Colts, who actually beat the Chiefs.
That is true. So, I mean, it's such a weird season, though, when you're doing power rankings. Like, there's so many teams that I'm trying to use the best logic that I can and keep consistent logic, right? Like, if there's a team that beat a bad team, I don't want to give them too much of a bump, right? Like, and I think I did that a little bit with the Cowboys, is like, okay, they're beating some of the bad teams. And then there's some teams that they lose, and I'm like, well, do I put them behind the team that they lost to? But then at the same time, like, I definitely don't think the Colts are better than the Chiefs. But then there are some times where it's like, hey, this team just beat that team. Like, they deserve to flip. So it's just hard. This year's power rankings are all over the map. And so, yeah, expect more mistakes from me.
I tell you, power rankings are interesting things when you actually have to sit down and legitimately put thought into it. Like, it's funny actually even having you break down the bottom, as pesky as it seems, as minuscule as it seems. The bottom of the rankings is actually where I base my rankings. I work from the bottom up.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's a good suggestion. So I go top down, right, and see who should fall, who should rise. And it's very difficult this year just because there's so many teams that are losing, right? Like the Rams I had definitely top 5, I want to say, but even possibly top 3 at the start of the season.
I think this goes into what we were saying at the start of the podcast. We're at the point in the season where you have to drop any preconceived notions you had about how good a team is or how bad a team is, because we're starting to get some definitive answers as far as what these teams are.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. And so I'm thinking here in the next 2 weeks is where we'll start to see fewer and fewer changes, right? And where the power rankings will start to solidify, but this year's been crazy.
Okay. So there's one last thing before you get to go to bed, because it is, well, it's actually both our bedtimes now. I'm now working days in my day-to-day life. Now, with that said, tell me about this Joker fatigue. Actually, who's the better Joker, Heath Ledger or Joaquin Phoenix?
So I think there are two almost different types of Joker in a sense, and they're actually two very different films in a lot of ways, right? In Heath Ledger version, right, you actually see the Joker being sort of that, sort of conniving planner, very, strategic in the way that he does things and actually enacting things and getting people to act on his behalf. Whereas in, the most recent version, Joaquin Phoenix, it's more about mental health, I thought, and the buildup of what drives somebody to become what we would see as an evil person or a villain, right? Like what factors would factor into driving such a person to the point in which they become a villain that can manipulate people and stuff like that and can commit such heinous acts. So I think they were both fantastic in sort of their own way. What were your thoughts?
My thoughts is I don't see how you don't give that man the trophy. He definitely went all out for that role, lost all that weight, put out an outstanding performance. If there's one thing that I can say, Joaquin Phoenix is not going to be the Clayton Kershaw of the movie film scene this year.
Yeah, no, he did a fantastic job. Now, something I will actually say in Joaquin Phoenix's defense, when I went and saw this movie, I was a little bit annoyed because I was eating at one of those movie theaters where you could actually like have your like lunch or your dinner, where they bring out food. And they took like an hour to get me my food. I kid you not. We ordered at like 12:30 and didn't get our food until like 1:20. So that had sort of distracted me a little bit. And at that point, I was just so upset. I'm like, this movie's taking a little bit too long, right? It's too slow, which it was more, like I said, more about the background and what leads into these factors and seeing the, sort of the personality and the development of the Joker. But I will say that factored into like my moodiness and me being upset at this movie. And I was like, Heath Ledger's better.
Okay, so basically if Aundre's hangry, he's not going to give you an honest opinion. He's just going to go with whatever he's feeling in the moment until you put food in front of him. Okay.
Exactly. No, I really do think that this film is really good. And like I said, what I did like about, this version of the Joker, is it very violent? Yes. Should you bring your 5-year-old to see it? Absolutely not. But it does have a lot of good things that I think we need to talk about as a society, which is, where should we maybe spend some of our tax money? How can we help people with mental issues? A lot of just these broader, major community sort of issues that I think do need to be discussed are sort of touched upon in the movie, and that I really did appreciate.
I definitely enjoyed it a lot. Definitely worth my time. I enjoyed it. And yeah, I can safely tweet about it without causing a national controversy.
Yeah. Don't offend any foreign countries, Juju, as you tweet about the Joker.
I've already sold the podcast to China, Aundre. I'm sorry, but we are obligated to endorse all Chinese sponsors at this point. Anyway, moving on. All right, guys, that wraps up another episode of the Slumpbuster with Juju and Dre. We look forward to doing episode 12 next week. We'll be back at it, hitting it hard. You can catch Dre actually this week on the Fantasy Football Podcast. Him and Eris are going to be going back and forth talking shit, depending on which way that matchup goes. If Eris's team loses to a third-string quarterback, Andre's going to have quite a fun day ahead of him. Go to our YouTube channel. We are continuing our series, Get Your Popcorn, where we're doing reviews on all classic sports movies. This month, we're continuing our baseball run. Be sure to check out our review of The Sandlot. We have our review of Bull Durham, the 1988 classic, up there right now. We also have a couple more to go. Major League, fun movie. Aundre, I don't know if you've seen Major League, but definitely put that on your watch list. Baseball fan, non-baseball fan, I legitimately have it as a top 10 movie for me. And then we're going to end it with Field of Dreams. And if you haven't had a chance to play catch with your dad, this will make you want to go out and grab that glove and ball. On that, Dre, you have anything to close it out?
Nope, nothing. Thanks for a good 11 weeks. I'll catch you later, Juju.
Catch you later, Dre. All right. Peace. Thanks once again to our listeners for joining us. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Store, Podbay, wherever you choose to download. We've got them all. Find our website, theslumpbuster.com, for weekly fantasy football rankings, power rankings, and other sports news. We are also on Instagram at Slumpbuster Podcast, on Twitter at Slumpbuster Pod, or go like our Facebook page for more updates on the show. Thanks once again, and we'll see you next time.